the thesis coming into this industry was we would start caring for folks when they just needed a little bit of help. And then as, if and when they needed more, those relationships would grow. And that thesis was disproven 50,000 times.
Right.
The reality was much more, as I'm sure you're familiar with. They had it until something kind of emergent or large scale happened.
Right.
And then we would get the call, or they would walk into Westminster and say, hey, we need something right now. And it's a much harder moment, sometimes impossible. And so,
Absolutely.
so we built this workshop to try to help folks become a bit more educated on how to do that, and put 1,000 or so folks through it over the last couple of years in several different cities. And it was very life-giving to sort of get more in front of it. And so I wanted to spend more time directed at that mission of education.
Yeah.
That's the thesis. And so
That's great. I love it.
Wendy Sager, I'm going to try to introduce you as well as I can. And then I want to invite you to give me a little bit more background. So
Sure.
we met at least a year, maybe a little bit more ago. And you work for Westminster Canterbury of the Blue Ridge, which I would describe as a very high-end, sophisticated, lovely, continuing care retirement community. And your background is diverse. I know there was some sales, I think you were a realtor, is that right?
For a hot minute, yes.
All right, so take me through it. How did you end up? My recollection is that your background is kind of an interesting entree into the types of folks that work in sort of the senior services industry, kind of heart-led, find their way into the space.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Well, my journey started in senior living. After raising 4 children, I devoted my life to them until they started going off to college, and then launched into career mode. And it was just word of mouth. I heard about an opportunity at a community in the Winchester area and started there in the marketing department, and fell in love with the industry and the population that we were serving. And so that was in 2013 when I started back. And so I've worked in a community level and also with home care, home health. I spent a little bit of time in real estate. And I think that was more my first role in senior living. I was in more of a supportive role, which is great. Helped me to learn the industry really from a lot of different angles. But I started craving more, and I desired to do more and to be directly working with the residents and also the prospects who were coming to learn more. So there wasn't an opportunity at the time with my community, so I thought, well, let me try to do something else to stretch and grow.
Yeah.
So I spent a little bit of time in real estate, and parts of it I liked and parts of it didn't like so much. I like more routine in my life, and with real estate, you're just kind of at the mercy of phone calls and what the customer needs at that specific time. So there wasn't a good work-life balance in that type of career. So I gravitated back towards senior living.
And when you started, was marketing just sort of the first door that opened, or did you feel like that was kind of dispositionally what you were aligned to?
Yeah. My background, so my undergraduate degree is in marketing. So it's definitely something I gravitated to and was of interest to me. So it wasn't just an available position of any sort that I just took. It was definitely one that was of interest to me. And then I also have a graduate degree, a master's degree in education. And so as I've grown in my career, I've realized that I use both. And when you were speaking a little while ago about, your desire to educate, I would say that's the majority of what I do. my role is to educate people and to teach them about options and how their decisions impact their life. So
It's really life-giving, and
sure is.
I am constantly surprised even today how little people truly understand this area, this stage of life. Even educated, well-resourced folks that are in the healthcare space, it kind of doesn't matter what information you bring to the table. It's just such a complicated, unusual chapter of life.
It is, and it's fraught with emotion, too. You know, there's a lot of, there's mixed emotions, and sometimes not good. You know, sometimes it's a grieving, it's a loss of who they feel like they used to be and who they are now and who they may become. And so there's more to it than just gathering information and making a choice for their future. There's a lot of emotion involved.
And it seems to me the emotion is, it's like a fog that makes it very difficult to make sort of objective and decisions that are rooted in one's own self-interest.
Definitely. It can be. You know, people approach it in different ways. And, you know, you've heard the analogy of some people view their life with their glasses half empty and some their glasses half full. And I see that all of the time. And I share that with people who seem to be struggling with this chapter, where it's just all the things I'm losing, all the things I'm giving up, all the bad changes. And I say to them, I see this all the time. And the people who are the most successful are those who choose to see what they are gaining, you know, to look at the positive things about their life and what things that they are thriving in rather than what they can no longer do or what they're giving up.
It's interesting. I wonder if it's maybe impossible to know this, but I wonder if folks that, you know, are that it's more of a reflection of how folks live. I mean, your advice is really sage to folks in that spot, but I wonder if you can tell, like, oh, this is kind of a person that has lived their life glass half full and they are embracing versus
sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes people approach the conversation in different ways too. So some people are just there wearing their heart on their sleeve and, you know, very open with you about what they're dealing with and how they feel about it, while others are very analytical about it and very matter of fact. And you can kind of tell there's a little bit more to go. But, you know, part of what I do and what you do is just building relationships, and it doesn't begin and end with a 1-hour meeting. That's the beginning. But it's a process and a development of trust.
Well said. Can you? I'm going to ask some questions that feel a little straightforward, but in the asking, I think I'm hoping to communicate just how common it is to misunderstand or to not know about these areas. So explain what a CCRC is, and if you would, and contextualize it against the other kind of senior living options that folks might be considering or better understand or maybe not.
Yeah, okay. A continuing care retirement community, that's what a CCRC is. And it provides independent living and a continuum of care. In the industry, there are those like Westminster Canterbury of the Blue Ridge that provide a full continuum of care, meaning assisted living, skilled nursing, memory support, skilled nursing for both short-term and long-term care. There are those that provide maybe assisted living and memory care, but not the skilled part. So I think that's part of the education process, is to show people that there are differences. Some people have the impression that it begins at assisted living. And so sometimes they're putting off the conversation until they need something, or close to, like thinking about I might need something soon. And so they're very surprised when they come to a place like Westminster Canterbury, which is majority of the people who live at my community are independent. 80% of our residents live in independent living. And so sometimes the conversation is happening after they no longer qualify to live at a community like ours. So the other options then come into play. And so I don't just stop there like, well, I can't help you, try someone else. I try to educate them on, okay, where can you go now? What are your other options?
2 follow-up questions. So I think certainly one insight that many don't understand is sort of the, I think, common prerequisite for moving into a CCRC, a continuing care retirement community, being that you start at the beginning of the continuum.
Right.
Is my understanding of that correct?
Yes, each community is different. So I always and tell people, ask the communities that you're looking at. This I can tell you about us. And generally, it's because there's just not availability for people to come directly into a care area. And again, every community manages that part differently.
Right.
We at Westminster Canterbury of the Blue Ridge, we maintain the occupancy level for care areas such that we can guarantee a resident a spot whenever they need it.
Right.
So we're not trying to fill up the space.
Right.
Therefore, we're limiting the number of people from outside who would come in directly to a care area. So it's not very common for us, but a different CCRC, they may not have that type of a model. So that's a great question for people to ask because you can't just assume they're all exactly alike.
It's an interesting, it's helpful context too, because the natural question of, well, why not? And it's in service to the folks that you're protecting their ability to move through the continuum.
Absolutely.
And to honor your promise that they can do that.
Yes. I mean, it's one of the main reasons why they decided to move there in the first place.
Right.
Was for that care in the future. And so we're carefully monitoring that on a weekly basis. We're monitoring who's showing that they might need to make a move soon. And then also those sudden things that happen where yesterday they were fine and today they're not, and they need something different. So we have a great team of associates who monitor that all the time. So we're really keeping a good gauge on that.
Certainly an area where there's a lot of confusion generally about senior living is like what happens in the different areas where folks live. And I'm wondering if you have any shorthands for describing independent living, describing assisted living, skilled nursing, that to help lay folks kind of orient into that.
Yeah, and it's great too because I'm not clinical, so I can speak
Right.
in normal language.
Yeah.
So independent living in a nutshell, one must be completely independent, not relying on someone else for basic care needs, activities of daily living, bathing, dressing, medication management, things like that. Also cognitive safety. So they need to be safe, cognitively speaking, to live by themselves without the assistance of someone else. So that's independent living.
So why would someone who's living in their own sort of residence or a condo spell out what the lifestyle differences are from living by yourself in your own home to moving into independent living?
When someone's living in their individual place, of course it depends upon whether or not their community has amenities. So if you're talking about just a regular neighborhood or apartment where, you might have a community swimming pool, maybe some common spaces, things like that are cared for by outside people. You're taking care of your home maintenance. You're taking care of your housekeeping. You're taking care of driving yourself places. You're shopping and all of that. Cooking and things like that. And at a community like Westminster Canterbury, those things are built in. So you've got a lot of amenities that are done for you. So we have groundskeepers, we have housekeeping, we have facility services. So you don't need to worry about, calling the repairman for, fixing your air conditioning that's blown up, and waiting for them to come. Our team takes care of it and you go about your day. So you've got a lot more freedom in that respect. You don't have the options to build on additions and things like that, so you don't have those chances to, renovate your home and things like that you do if you're living somewhere else, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, my hypothesis, and push back if this is wrong, is that this is probably one of the areas where there is the least amount of pushback among older adults. It's just like getting rid of the responsibility of managing one's own home.
Definitely. I think it becomes harder and harder. And as people are wanting to relinquish let's say the yard work, finding the people to do it can be problematic. I know in my life, someone dear to me has a person who does her yard, and, he's kind of persnickety about what he will and will not do. And she had trouble finding a housekeeper who was reliable, who did things the way she wanted to do it. And so it's just hard sometimes to find. You may have the means to pay for it, but it can be very hard to find it and schedule it and keep that going.
Yeah, it's two-pronged. You're either, are you comfortable doing all of these tasks yourself? Mm-hmm. And if not, are you capable of being the project manager? Do you want to be the project manager? Because so much of aging is managing people coming and going, and that's just not easy. It's increasingly difficult to find reliable people and yeah, that makes good sense to me.
And I think some people don't realize how much time they're spending doing it.
Yeah.
So when they do move to a community that provides those things, they realize suddenly they have time to travel more or take classes, discover a new passion. We had a resident who had never painted before in her life. And maybe 4 years at the community, decided to take an art class. And now she's realized, not only do I really like it, but I'm pretty good at it, and is really thriving in this new chapter of reinventing herself and learning new things about herself. Whereas before, she may have been spending it with other things that were not quite as fun.
Talk to me about I want to get you to describe what assisted living is and what it isn't as well. But so I'll earmark that so I don't forget. But talk to me about one of the things that I find fascinating in senior living communities are the various considerations that spouses have. And the utility of being in a community when there are spouses that are maybe different ages or at different stages in their aging. I hear a lot in my planning conversations that part of the perceived value for older adults is the comfort of knowing that a community gets built as a couple, and then if and when one of them passes away, it gives that comfortable place for them to continue to live and to be known.
Absolutely. It sure does. I had a conversation with one resident who that was one of her main reasons of wanting to be at a community was, she described it as, I have health conditions and I know that if something happens to me, my husband now has a group. He has friends, he has a place where he feels like home, and I don't need to worry about him being lonely. So I would say that's definitely part of it. And the other thing is, so many spouses transition from being, your spouse, a partner, to a caregiver. And it changes the dynamic completely. And at a community, the people who live as couples can continue to be the spouse, the partner, and we provide the care. So it's really freeing in that regard as well.
One kind of common story that I feel like I've heard so many times over the years from adult children is we didn't realize how much weight mom or dad was carrying on behalf of their spouse.
Absolutely.
And they're really good at hiding it because it's important to them to honor their loved ones. So that makes good sense to me.
Yeah, and I think too, people get to that part of their lives where it becomes very difficult, and one of the spouses is really failing physically, maybe mentally as well, or just mentally. And they don't realize how bad it was going to get. They think it'll be fine, I can handle it. And then you get to that place where, wow, I didn't realize how bad it was going to be.
What would you say, I mean, this is a hard question to answer, but certainly there are categorically folks that are very well suited to senior living and really take to it. And there's probably another group that is, whether they're dispositionally against it or whether it just doesn't make as much sense for them. Can you add some color to that? So folks are saying, like, I don't know if this is, I don't know if, I imagine there folks will watch and say, like, oh, my mom would love to be in a community like that. My dad would hate to be in a community like that.
Right.
Can you add some color based on your observations about, they're generalizations, of course.
Right. Well, I think that's one of the misconceptions people have of a community, and I see it all the time, and that's one of the things I enjoy so much about my job is that I see people, they're being illuminated to like, oh, this is not what I thought it was. And I don't know what they were picturing, but I can imagine, an apartment building. And I say to people all the time, if you lived in an apartment in college or as a younger person, this is not that.
Yeah.
It's completely different. And I hear all the time as we're walking through the buildings, it's so quiet. Where is everyone? And I say, they're out. They're living their lives. They're doing things. They're not hanging out in the hallway. And so I would say community living is for introverts and extroverts. We have things that would accommodate both personalities. Apartments where, you can be more where the central activity is happening, and cottages where you can kind of be on the periphery and you have the same amenities, but you kind of have a little distance between you and all the action. So we have all types of people who live in our community. So I think a lot of it is just perception that suddenly I'm going to be living in a fishbowl, I'll have no privacy, people will be ringing my doorbell every 10 minutes, and I will have to be a social butterfly all the time. In fact, I met with a couple, they've been on our waiting list for a couple of years, and we were looking at cottages, and they had initially thought apartments, and the wife just could not get her head wrapped around it. Like, I just cannot see myself living in an apartment. She describes herself as an extreme introvert. And so we're looking at the cottages, and she goes, this is a game changer for me. I can see myself living here. This is more my speed. So I think, in the process of discovering and learning about each senior living option, It's a process, and it involves time spent in that place to see what life is like. What are the people like? How do people interact with me when I go there? What does it feel like? What's the personality, of the community?
I'm trying to figure out how to ask you roughly, my sense is you can't put a number on it, but my dad's about to be 75. And I think I look at his cohort, and I think they wouldn't be of the mindset to be thinking yet about wanting to move even into independent living in a senior living community. But my instinct at the same time is they are the perfect age to begin making that transition, or at the very least begin, if that's something, if that makes sense for them, that kind of is the age where you move in and you have a bunch of years in independent living. Help orient the adult child of someone who's sort of 70, 75 years old as opposed to 80.
Well, a lot of it depends on one's own experience. And the people that I see coming in who are younger have had, and I mean late 50s, early 60s, they're coming for themselves. And it's usually because they've had an experience with their own parents or somebody in their life, and they don't want to do that, whatever that was, and usually it is, lack of care, hard to find help. They go to a place because that's what's available and it's not right for them. Whatever the case may be, they don't want to do that. And so they decide, I want to look early. I want to have more options. I want to be in the driver's seat. So a lot of it has to do with one's experience. And some people don't have that experience, especially some people's parents did not go through a prolonged illness that resulted in any type of care, and they think, well, that's going to happen to me. But as we see over and over, one never knows what will happen. So the education that we do, the conversations that we have are helpful to spark that, at least the interest, to try to learn more at a younger age. That's one of the reasons why I do a lot of networking outside of the community, just to meet people like you who are partners in this endeavor, but also to get the conversation started so that it's not too late when they approach it.
What percentage of folks come to you too late? Where you're just like, you need assisted living. Yeah. Also, we have a wait list. Like, you've missed your opportunity to come, sadly, to Westminster, so let me help you find other great resources.
Okay, so it actually falls in two categories. The first category is their first conversation with me is too late. So I would say, I don't know, it's not a big percentage, maybe 5% of the people I meet with. The second category is the people who started having the conversations when it wasn't too late. But now we've got a big waiting list that we're on, and time is passing and things are happening. And by the time something either becomes available to them or they've reached the point where they're ready to consider it seriously, then it's too late. And that's happening more often than not. Other than when residents who I've come to know pass away, that's the next hardest thing for me, is to have a conversation with people or their loved ones and have to tell them, I'm sorry, we're not an option for you any longer.
And just to make sure I understand it, it's situations where folks are considering the wait list or either on the wait list or they've been given an option but they're not ready to take it.
Right.
And then time passes such that they are then in need of assisted living. And so they've missed their window. Is that right? Is that what you're describing?
Sometimes, and sometimes I would say more often it's a cognitive decline that's happened. And they're not appropriate for independent living. And they're kind of in this in-between space where they're doing all the things they need to do in terms of basic care needs, but cognitively they're not safe to move in as a new resident into independent living.
So what's the advice for folks? Like, what's your counsel on managing this process well if a person's desire or they feel aligned to live in a community like yours?
Right, it's repetition. So I'm all the time, and the people who I work with closely, they know this about me, that I will remind them all the time about the medical qualification. That if you are waiting, especially, I had a visit with a couple recently who they were being offered a residence, and they said, we're going to pass, we're just not ready. And I said, all right, let me just remind you about the medical qualification. Don't wait too long. And they said, you've reminded us 3 or 4 times. And so we all chuckled about that. But I just think it's keep reminding people the reason you are even contemplating this is not because our independent living is better than the house that you're currently in. Nobody moves to a community because it's better than where they are. They move there because we provide for them what their home does not. We provide them that extra care that they might need in the future, and they know what they're getting with Westminster Canterbury.
It's interesting. There's a similarity there that I'm trying to unpack in my head, which is something about the difficulty of giving good, objectively true advice in your seat or in my seat that feels very self-serving. So as a representative of a service, when I'm saying like, here's your best case scenario for aging in your home, for staying in your home, if that's what you've decided to do.
Right.
Truly the best thing you can do is start early and start small. It's very hard to deliver that message in a way that doesn't feel like, here's a guy trying to sell me in-home care services. And I hear a little bit of that same kind of inherent friction in saying, you're talking to folks and you're saying, let me remind you of the medical qualifications. I do not want to have this call with you where you're saying I'm ready now and I'm saying actually you're no longer qualified.
Right.
That will break my heart and it will be very upsetting to you. So it's earnest and it is best practice, and yet it probably reads a little bit at times as, Wendy's trying to get us to move. This is her job. She's trying to get us to move. I'm just kind of observing that dynamic.
I could see how it might be perceived like that, but people also know that if they say no, there's 700 people after them who one of them will say yes. So, it's
It's a great point.
Yeah, it's not something I'm truly acting in their best interest to just remind them. And ultimately, and I always will acknowledge this, the choice is yours. You're in the driver's seat. You decide what you're going to do. All I am here to tell you is what we offer and what are some of the ramifications of waiting. And I've seen it enough that it gives me a sense of urgency, especially if I know and the person has conveyed to me, this is their ultimate goal. People will say to me, we know we'll be at Westminster Canterbury. We've decided this is where we want to be. We're just not ready. And so they've conveyed that to me, that that's their ultimate goal. And the only way to put it in place, I had one gentleman, I was showing him an apartment, and clearly he was like, I'm just not ready. I'm just not ready. He said, I want to move right before I need something. And I said, well, when is that? And, if you can figure that out, then let me know. And we both laughed about it. So it's unrealistic. That's really, he just said the quiet part out loud.
Yes.
He said what everybody is thinking.
Yeah.
But it doesn't work like that.
That's interesting. That's freight loaded with emotion, like you were saying.
Definitely.
If I were listening to our conversation and I had a 75-year-old parent or an 80-year-old parent that was considering independent living. And I heard you say, and I know that this is common among the most desirable senior living communities, that there's a long wait list.
Yeah.
How should I understand that? Is that would drive, as a highly anxious type A person, that would create a ton of anxiety in me.
Yeah.
How realistic is it that someone ever gets to the top of a long wait list? Try to shine some light on that.
Right. It's realistic. For our community, it depends upon, and I would say for all communities, it depends upon what somebody is looking for. And our waiting list is comprised of people who mostly want something big. So if you're somebody who wants something smaller, your wait won't be as long. So we have a general idea of how long it might take somebody, depending upon what they're looking for.
Got it.
And so I know when people start asking, especially analytical numbers people, they start asking for numbers, and I say, I know what you're doing. You're trying to figure this all out statistically, which you can do to a degree, but it's not an exact science. So we give our best guess scenario. But what you were just saying brought to me a conversation I had just a few days ago. It was a conversation with a son and his mom, and she's been on the waiting list. She's not in any hurry, but he suddenly has had an experience with his in-laws, which has sparked that panic like you were just describing.
Sure.
And I could hear it in his voice. I could see it on his face. I could read it in his body language, that he didn't feel like his mom was getting it, and he was, but Mom, you have to move before something happens. And she just said, but son, I'm just not ready. I'm just not ready. You have to understand, it's a process and it's not easy. And so I was kind of the mediator, because I understand both places, and trying to bring him to a place of understanding. Yes, it's good to have conversations with your parents, and it's good to remind them these things, about don't wait too long. But in the end, it's their decision to make, and we have to respect that. And we give them the information, they digest it, and they ultimately decide what they're going to do. And so just trying to get him to a place where we've described it, she understands, you heard that she understands it, and we kind of have to pause and just let her think about it. And I know every conversation that I have, it is a step forward, because they take what they learn and they chew on it and they think, and they try to visualize themselves and moving and all the things that are involved. With people who are on the waiting list, who are offered something to consider, an apartment or cottage, we go to look, and I've had people say, I just feel so bad because I feel like I'm wasting your time. We keep coming, you keep showing us, we keep saying no. And I assure them, it's never a waste of time, because every time you see me, you're doing mental calisthenics and you're saying, okay, if we take this, what needs to happen? And so every time you come, you get a step closer to making a decision.
I want to ask about this area that seems to be misunderstood, that kind of is an overlapping area between senior living communities and personal care services like ours, which is when folks opt to remain in independent living versus matriculate through the care continuum to assisted living. And to do that, they bring in either a private caregiver or a caregiving company like ours.
Right.
Can you help explain that phenomenon?
Right. I get that question a lot, because oftentimes a need is not a major need, it's just a little thing. It might be, I just want somebody to help me wash my hair a couple times a week.
Right.
I just need somebody to come fill up my pill pack, that daily reminder, pill reminder. I just need somebody to help me with shopping or whatever it might be. And they're thinking, I don't want to make a move to assisted living when I can do all these other things, and I just need these couple things. So,
and I love my townhome, or
Absolutely.
I love my space.
Yeah, definitely. So it's allowed. For our purposes, it's not allowed to come in with that kind of a service, but over time, if somebody wants to hire a private caregiver or private assistant for those type of things, they're definitely able to.
Yeah, another scenario that we see a lot is just someone that is recovering from an illness or has kind of a short-term need where
Right.
they're not there, they wouldn't be in the headspace to move to assisted living.
Right.
They need someone for a few weeks while they regain
Sure.
strength or
Yeah, we do provide respite areas, so we do provide respite apartments for people to do short-term stays.
Got it.
But in the case where they're like, no, I want to sleep in my own bed,
Right.
that would be perfectly appropriate. Yeah.
Yeah, so if you could just take us a little bit through the continuum.
Okay. So assisted living is for a person who needs help with basic care needs. Bathing, dressing, medication management, help with eating, dressing, those types of things. So assistance. When somebody progresses to where they need more 24-hour attention, supervision, more round-the-clock medications, more assistance physically with moving from one place to another, they would then progress to long-term skilled care, long-term skilled nursing.
Is there a population that moves into independent living and they stay in independent living their entire lives? Is there a population that goes independent to assisted and then stays in assisted their entire life? Like,
Right.
How common is it? I mean, to me, part of the value proposition for a community is the peace of mind of knowing.
Right.
But maybe one of the hurdles for folks is or one of the stories that we tell ourselves is, well, I don't think I'll ever need long-term skilled
Right.
nursing, so why would...
Statistics don't show that, as you know.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's like 65% or 75% of people over 65 will need some type of long-term care. So, and I see it playing out definitely at our community. And my previous community is that most people who are residents at our community do end up moving to a higher level of care versus live their lives out in independent living.
I'm curious what questions you get asked when you're at lunch or when you're hanging out with friends, as someone they look to as a person who understands this space very generally. What's the question you find yourself answering most?
Let's see. I would say most people have heard about our waiting list and waiting lists in general. So most people ask if that's true. And they also ask about the qualifications to move. Is it true? What I hear a lot is it true you have to walk in? And I say, well, that's not really how we describe it. It's just people who are considered independent by their physician and not needing help with basic care needs and not needing help with cognitive safety. And so I would say a lot of it is just trying to clear up what they've heard. Is it true? Is this really the state of things? Some people don't believe it. They think we're going to go, she's going to try to sell us something, and we're not ready for that. And then they realize, oh, wait, they don't have anything available. It really is true.
I want to talk to you about cost, and I want to try to figure out how to do that without putting you in a bad spot. But when we've talked about this in the past, I have found it very comforting. Just the misunderstandings about the cost. Obviously, these communities are you need to be reasonably well resourced to move into a community like that, just like you need to be reasonably well resourced to bring care into the home.
Definitely.
But I also think that there's almost a culture of throwing around these massive numbers, and a sort of a fundamental misunderstanding that results from that. Like, well, I don't have X in cash, and so talk to me like I am. I guess like I am me. Like I have no concept really of what my dad might be able to afford.
Right.
He may be able to afford it. He may not. All I know is somebody once told me that there was a $2 million buy-in at the community.
Right.
And how does that work? And how do people fund it? And yeah.
Yeah, that's a common misconception. So, the pricing, you get what you pay for sure. And communities like Westminster Canterbury of the Blue Ridge, we provide a lot of service. We provide a lot of amenities. And so, it costs money to run all those things and employ people, quality people. So, there is that. But, what we offer is a range of different apartments, different cottages, and there's a range of pricing. And so, that's really a main part of what people want to know is what does it cost and can I afford it? And that's one of the first things we discover if someone is joining our waiting list is we'll tell them exactly what they can afford. And so there's a range for us. There's an entrance fee. There's a monthly fee. It'll range based upon square footage, whether there's one or two people. And, so it will be dependent upon definitely assets, income, and the age of the people who are applying, and their projected expenses. That's part of our application is we want to capture the quality of life they want to have. And so people are kind of afraid that I'm going to get into this predicament where I can't ever do anything, I can't ever go anywhere, but we capture that in the application process so you already know that you can. The other part of Westminster Canterbury is we have a foundation. We're a not-for-profit. We have a foundation that provides additional support to residents who, through no fault of their own, have outlived their means. And in the 35 years we've been around, no one has ever had to move because they could no longer afford it. So it's peace of mind people are looking for. They're looking for peace of mind. Who's going to care for me and can I afford it? And so you'll find a range of affordability in this area. And a lot of it has to do with amenities, quality of care, and so that will impact the cost. There's also a misconception among some people who haven't really looked much into senior living that insurance and Medicare will cover things like this. And so that's part of the education is to show, to let people know, it is not assisted living, long-term care, memory care. They are not something that your health insurance, that Medicare will cover. There are portions of our community that are covered by Medicare and insurance, and those are the short-term rehabilitation therapies, physical, occupational, speech therapies, and their clinic. We have a clinic that people can use. So those things are billed to insurance. Everything else is covered in monthly fees. So people don't, maybe that's the first part of their learning is, oh, I didn't realize that. I thought my insurance would pay for this, and they didn't realize it's all private pay.
Okay, two questions. I'm going to list them. We can take them in order.
Sure.
One is about the equity piece, and we talked about this a while back, and it was very comforting to me. Some of the nuances around that. And the second piece is about long-term care insurance.
Sure.
And where exactly how that works and where if folks have that, when they can apply it.
Definitely. So at Westminster Canterbury, there is an entrance fee. And there's different options for people. The entrance fee is partially refundable over a period of time. One of them will decline after 50 months, 4 years and 2 months. There's no refund of the entrance fee after that time. We also offer a 50% refundable option, which is a higher option than the non-refundable. But a person would retain 50% of their entrance fee that would go to their estate. The other thing that is unique to Westminster Canterbury in terms of what's offered in Charlottesville is our life care model, which deals with a couple of things, offering independent living and a full continuum of care, but also the monthly fee that a resident pays does not increase when they receive a higher level of care. So that helps people to retain their assets as well. At another type of community, that would be fee for service, where their monthly fee increases when the care increases. Sometimes that could be really cost prohibitive and run through a person's assets much more quickly. So that's how I would describe the financial model.
That piece to me, I maybe just as a worrier, that would give me comfort to think like, well, what if something crazy happened? And I'll just keep using my poor dad as an example, but he moves in and then passes away 6 months later, and we paid this huge initiation fee. I didn't realize that there was a refundable component to that. So
it declines at a 2% rate. So after 6 months, it would have declined to 12%.
Got it.
And the estate would get the remainder back.
Yeah, that's useful.
Yeah. Regarding long-term care insurance, residents, sometimes people, when we're talking about it, people are not sure that they can use long-term care insurance at Westminster Canterbury. They say, well, I've got this insurance. Why do I need you? And my answer is we provide the where and the who. You have this means to help fund your long-term care, but you still need to find the providers to do that. And so at Westminster Canterbury, a resident who has a long-term care policy, their benefit would come to them once they move to a higher level of care. Even though the monthly fee is not increasing, they're now able to trigger that insurance benefit that would come directly to them that could help offset their monthly fee.
And do you have any concept of how it would be calculated? If their monthly fee stays the same, then how can the long-term care insurance company itemize, like, there, in my mind, I would have thought, okay, there's a delta there between the cost of the room and board and the cost of care, and so maybe you just unpack.
We provide that. Yeah. So we have social workers, and working along with the business office provides the documentation needed to show what portion of this is going towards this type of care. We document that the person is now receiving this type of care, and that's how they justify it.
And so at that point, they just start to get a check every month.
Yes.
Which is great, because there are so many folks that just don't effectively leverage the investment into long-term care insurance that they've made. Anything that you thought I might ask that I have yet to ask? Anything that you feel like I'm missing or that you'd want to share out with someone that was learning about this space with us?
I think we've touched on it a bit, and I know we wanted to focus on adult children, and so I was reflecting on that and in preparation for today. And I would say, for adult children, just to reiterate, gather the information, present it to your parents, and just remember where they are, and that ultimately they will decide what they feel is best for them. And just like we've made choices in our lives that our parents would have maybe chosen differently, we've taken our own path. Your parents are going to take their own path too. And just love them, just love them. And it's not a negative if they choose something that's different than you. they'll figure it out just like we did, just like we made our own path and we figured it out, and they were shaking their heads going, well, we told you so. It works both ways sometimes, and they're adults and they'll figure it out.
Well said.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing your
You're
knowledge.
welcome.
I think so much of what you said will be useful to folks that watch this. So
I hope so.
I'm
I
grateful
hope so.
too.
We consider ourselves educators above anything else, and so taking the opportunity to share information that people can then use to make decisions or share with other people to help put them in a better place, to make decisions and give themselves more options. I think it's always good.